Okay, I see three of you, Eric, Krista, and Logan. I'll just wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone others logs in. Are you able to do questions? I'm not sure if your microphones are activated, so I'm not sure I can hear you. So if you can respond to two of my questions. One, are you able to hear me? And two, are you able to see my, I guess my desktop, so that see all my applications, especially Visual Studio? So if one or more of you could respond to let me know. Okay. Okay, so thank you. So if you're able to do that, then I'll go ahead. I am recording the sessions. If somebody's not able to join, they should be able to see, and hopefully we'll have the recordings posted on YouTube so that it makes it easier to navigate. I'll let you know as soon as the BEIT person starts doing it. I'm trying to keep this window open, otherwise I'll try to keep switching back and forth between this and the Visual Studio window. I'm going to focus today on let's see, let me start with what the plan that I'd had for last class, and okay, so one of the things I'd asked you to do was to work on displaying the collection, the list, which we were not doing earlier. We were just getting the essentially whatever the data type was. It was just displaying that. So one of the things that I wanted you to look at was to how do you go about displaying the values, and I had mentioned looking at using the loop structure, or to iterate through this so that you can display all the values. And so I know that Eric was having some problem with his with displaying it on the web page when you run it, but before I come up with discussing the solution, I wanted to see any one of you have figured out the solution to how to display in the view. So if you go into your view, calculator, find Fibonacci is the web page on which we prompt the user to provide an input term, and then we are displaying the result in the Fibonacci result view. And sometimes I get this the namespace not being recognized on a view, and it actually will run. So if it's for some reason it indicates this as it detects it as an error. But anyways, my question was end of last class, if you had to run this, you come to find Fibonacci unless I have any breakpoint. If I'm running it in debug mode, then it won't come. But let's say we are on this page prompting the user, and you can see there's a generic application name. We'll see how we can change that. So I enter the Fibonacci number, and then click on the button. It comes back with this response. Okay, so the first thing to figure out is how to fix this, and then we will also look at changing where do we change the application name, and if you want something on the footer which appears. So those kinds of things we can take a look at. So, but as I said, the first thing is I want to see if any one of you has actually worked on that, figuring it out. And the second piece, which I think I did towards the end of last class, in case you didn't follow it, if I were, instead of being on this page, if I was on some other page, for example, if I had been on calculator.cs, and if I hadn't done what I did at the end of last class, I said I want to start the web application from a specific page. By default, it starts from a current page, and if my current page is a model page, and if I try to start without debugging, let's see what happens. Does it just? I just need to save it. There I don't have a specific page, so I'm going to remove this so that you can see what happens by default in case you didn't do what we did or what I had done towards the end of last class. So let me go through those steps again. So I'm on calculator class, start without debugging. As you can see, it has a problem going to the view or going to the starting web page that we have wanted to start from, which is to prompt the user with find Fibonacci. So in case you didn't do this end of last class, one of the things you want to do is go to project and access the app properties. And in this case, I named it first MVC app, last name, and properties. So if you go into that, there are several sub-items that you can set as properties, the application, the build, but the one that we are currently interested in is the web property. So, and the start action within the web property, we want it to be a specific page, and that specific page is, the way we access a particular page is we have this naming convention. So you have a directory calculator which corresponds to the calculator controller, and so we want it to start at calculator, and then inside of calculator we said find Fibonacci is the method name, so we'll say find Fibonacci. So this is how you designate a specific starting page. The other thing to note is we use a built-in web server called IIS Explorer. So and it gives you a default URL. In case you're having any problems, you might want to explore this. Like Eric has been having a problem connecting to the web server on the local machine. So if at all you're having any problems, this is one place to check. But for us, we are using the local host, not an external host. If you're going to an external host, then you would choose that. But for us, we are using this internal host, which is actually a web server that's built into Visual Studio. So if you make those two adjustments or changes, and if I leave that, and now I'm continuing to be on the calculator class, and previously I got an error, but because I've now said I want to start from that specific page, not just whatever my current page is, current file, so now it should go to whatever I designated as my starting web page, and give me the result. Obviously, I'm still not getting the correct result, but at least I know now that every time I start up the application, it's going to go to find Fibonacci on the calculator. My question now was, has anyone actually done the display of each of the items? So Logan, you did manage. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm assuming it's just Logan. Okay. So let's just go back to where we would address it. Obviously, the starting point would be the controller. So in the controller, we have two methods. One is our find Fibonacci, which is the controller method for the initial view, where we prompt the user to enter a Fibonacci term, and then we submit that particular value. It goes back to the calculator controller, to the second method, which, if you look at it, it has the same name as the first method, but you can use the same name for multiple methods as long as there are some criteria that you follow. So let me ask you this. So when can you use the same name for two methods? So what I mean by that is, if you have the same method, and this is something that you use, that several companies use in their in practice, because you don't want to be naming these two methods essentially are interrelated methods, so you don't necessarily want to keep giving entirely different names. So in some cases you want to have the same name, but obviously it could complain, the .NET compiler would complain if certain conditions are not met. So let's go with this fundamental concept. When can you use the same name for two methods? Again, I want you to think about it, so I'm going to pause a few, like 20, 30 seconds, and see if any of you can come up with the response. So the question again is, when can you use the same name for two methods? What is required for you to be able to do that? There are a couple of, well, I think totally three different ways in which you can, in which .NET allows you, or any environment, whether it's Java or Ruby, or in this case C#, they all follow the same rules. So anyone, what would you need? And this is something we'll be seeing fairly frequently with MVC. Okay, so I have Chris, different return types and different parameters. Actually, they have, okay, very good. So different return types, Logan had also given that, and the parameters are different. Okay, so those are return types, parameters, and parameter types, and as Ashley pointed out, even if they are in a different order, it gets accepted. But the main way to distinguish is usually parameters. In this case, the first one doesn't have any, the second one has one. Even if you had one parameter in both, if the data types are different, it would accept it. Also, if the return types are different. So keep that in mind as we keep progressing through MVC. Okay, so once you have that set up, we are basically sending the values, and the controller is accessing the model class, the calculator class, which is in the model. Okay, so we are in model, it's going into the calculator class, and asking the calculator class to do the work. You will find that in MVC, as we develop more in MVC, as we develop more complex applications, the model classes do most of the work. The controller will basically be calling the classes in the model, calling the methods, and then and then it basically gets some response back. But in most cases, it's going to be some data that comes from there. But once you have the data, you have to, well, in this case, the controller has to pass the data to the view. And one way to send data from the controller to a view, I shouldn't say the controller, from a controller to a view, is using using the view bag. So you can see that I created a variable on the view bag called Fibonacci number, which accesses or retrieves the value that was sent back by the calculator class. Okay. And then I used the second view bag to get to store the list of all the Fibonacci sequence numbers. Okay. And we are sending this data to the view and accessing the variables that have been stored inside the view bag, which we stored inside the view bag in the controller. So that's one way of sending data from the controller to the view. Again, in the next few classes, we'll start looking at other ways of passing data. For now, this is the simplest way. Okay. Now the starting question is, how do we change this? This is obviously not working. So what do we do? And I think Logan said that he had figured out the solution. Again, so let me see, anyone other than Logan who did this? Okay. So Logan, can you just lay out very briefly how you did it? Or if before I provide a solution, I want you to just think about it. Okay, for each loop, okay, that is the most efficient way of doing it. Let me ask you this: does anyone else, other than Logan, know how to work with a for each as opposed to a for loop? If anyone else knows how to use this for each loop, just type yes. If not, okay, Eric said he does. Okay, now if you didn't have a for each loop, if you didn't know how to use a for each loop, what I would like you to think of is, what is the problem with using a for loop here? So let's say we want to, okay, so just doing this is a list of values. So that's not going to help us. Well, you saw what it was doing. It was just displaying that it's a list, and it's not giving us the values inside this list. So, and I'll just use a break here so that I can break these two so that it doesn't show up on the same. So the question is, what do I do to list this? So one thing that you can think of is, well, I want to set up, if I try to use a regular for loop, so then I will say something like int index. Let's say I start from index 0, index until some particular term. So if I wanted to say this, as long as it is, so I start from index 0, so as long as it is less than something, what is that something? Index plus plus, and then I'll have to set up the body of the loop. Now I want you to think of, if I was setting up a for loop, what would I need for this to be, for the index to be less than, for essentially the stopping condition, what value would I need to know for me to be able to set up the stopping condition? Again, I'll just pause for a few seconds to see if you can tell me this. Okay, Krista, input term. Yes, it is the input term. So, now the next question is, if we need the input term for the stopping condition for this loop, and remember that we are now in the view, the .cs HTML file. So if we need the input term in the loop, do we have access to it? So if I just said input term, obviously this is not going to, I have set up this as, well, if I want to set this up, by the way, there's one thing that I have to do. I probably should run it for you to see this. So if I just went to debug, start without debugging. Okay, so you can see what just happened here. So again, I'm going to just pause a second for you to see the result and tell me what is not quite right here. Can you see this? What do you sort of decipher from this? And obviously that in turn will tell you that something isn't quite right. Okay, actually for each loop would need each input term in the list. Okay, we'll look at the fourth, yeah. Logan pointed out the immediate problem. We are missing the @ symbol. So if you don't have the @ symbol, essentially it's being displayed as plain text. It's not, we said we have, the reason that this is a .cs HTML file, if you see over here, and obviously it shows you the extension here as well. The reason it is, it's a combination of C# and HTML, and as Logan pointed out, if you want to distinguish what is plain HTML or simple text to be displayed versus something that's C# code, you need to use the @ prefix, the @ symbol. So now this code is recognized as being C# code, and you can see once we did that, input term is being flagged as a potential problem in compiling. Now why is this an issue? Because we obviously didn't get the input term. It's in the controller, but it didn't come into the view. So for the for loop to work, we would need this input term, the stopping condition, which obviously makes it, well, we need some more information. So maybe we can try to figure that out. If you just use the for each loop, you actually won't need to worry about getting the input term into the view. And maybe I should show you that. Let me see if anyone has any questions before that. And this might help if we discuss this, it might help address what Ashley has mentioned here with the for each. You would need each input term in the list. The for each actually you could work on this without. So let me comment this out. So I'm going to use the comment out option from which is available here, because in your commenting out it uses this. You cannot just use a slash. You have the @ symbol followed by the asterisk sign. So that's how you comment out a section. This is the start and this is the end. Accidentally deleted that. Okay. So now let's contrast it with the for each. Again, since this is C# code, you'll have to start with the @ symbol, and then the body is here. Okay, now in the for each, the difference is you specify the in operator. So you'll have to say, I'm going to look inside each element of a list, or a list of objects, and I'm going to pull out one object at a time. So I have to say, look inside a particular list. And what is this list? Where is this list available? Can somebody tell me where? So, and I'm saying I'm going to look inside a list. Where is that list? And again, I'll just pause for a few seconds so to see if you can tell, somebody can tell me where is this list of items, the Fibonacci sequence items, where is it available to me? Okay. Again, Logan has provided the response, so I'll use his response. He says view bag the dot Fibonacci sequence, which is correct. So this list, remember, is being sent. If you look at the controller, we said that the Fibonacci sequence is being sent to the view in the view bag inside the variable Fibonacci sequence. So if you go back in here, you'll say view bag dot Fibonacci sequence. Okay, so this is what contains the list. Now, what the for each is doing is, I said we want to pull out one item at a time from this view bag. Okay, so we have to specify what each of those items are going to be. So I'm going to say each Fibonacci number. So this is each of the Fibonacci numbers in this sequence, one at a time, which is how you process a regular for loop. You're basically trying to pull out one item at a time, look at it, and do whatever processing you want to do with it. Now, so we have to basically specify, take one item at a time from inside this list. Now, what is the data type of each of the items that we are pulling out from this list? Again, I'm going to just give you a few seconds to think about it. So we are telling that we want .NET, the processor, to look inside each of these list items and provide us one item at a time as we go through this list. So what's the data type of each of the items inside? Somebody other than Logan this time? What is the data type of each item? So I have to specify the data type, and this essentially becomes my variable name for each item that I'm retrieving from the list. So what's the data type? List int, it's Megan. Okay, let's just look at what Krista said, and Megan had said a list int. Megan is right that this is a list of integers, but as Krista pointed out, we are retrieving one item at a time from that list. So each item's data type is going to be an int. So it's each item is an int. So we look inside this list, get one item at a time, which is an integer, and then once we have that each of those items, what we are saying is, well, just go ahead and display that. So what we want to do is display this variable value inside of this variable. And if I just did this, and just to show you, I'll just keep it as this, and you can see that it seems to be complaining. The easiest way to address this is to use an @ symbol. Okay. So one thing to remember is when you're referencing this variable inside of the loop, keep in mind that you still want to use that @ symbol to say that it is part of your C# process, and that you're actually referencing this variable, which is pulling out one item at a time from the list. Okay, so now if we were to run this, okay, I'll just use some number here, 6. Okay. Well, the Fibonacci sequence is system generic collections list. The place where it's coming from is, I haven't removed this, so this part is still coming back and indicating this. So if I remove this, just save this and refresh this. Okay, so you can see that it doesn't show up once I've removed the @viewBag.Fibonacci sequence here. It doesn't show up that it's a list, generic list data type. Instead, it gives the sequence. Now, if you want to separate each item, each number, so this is giving it as though it is one number, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. But if you want to separate it with something like spaces or commas, it's actually, I'm trying to think if there is a simple way of doing it. Let's see what happens if I use just a simple comma there. Whether it Okay, so it gives an error because it's basically not accepting. Let's see what would be. It's actually surprisingly. So you can use, like what I'm doing is bringing in some HTML tags, like text, and let's say if I put a comma there, so basically I'm trying to say, well, give a comma as some HTML text between each of the numbers. So let's go ahead and try this. I basically save it. Anytime, if I'm making changes on the view, usually once you save it, you can go back, refresh, and you can probably see the results. So, okay, so it gives them with spaces. It gives obviously a space after the last one. You could try to prevent that from happening if you, well, you would need to know when you have run out of it, or if you can think of a more creative way of doing it. Try to see if there's any easy way of preventing the last comma from coming in. I'm afraid that the only way it would come in is if I'll have to keep count and then say don't go beyond it. Does anyone have a simple solution? I'm not able to think of something very simple here. What I'm thinking of will need an if statement, and like you'll have to basically say something like if the number of the element is less than some, so I'll have to keep a counter and do that. I don't want to get into that right now, but if anyone has a better solution, a simpler one, let me know. For now, as I said, I'm not able to think of a simple solution that doesn't go into setting up some conditions. Let me just pause a second. So if any of you has a way of easily removing the last comma, let me know. Does anyone have a solution? Okay. If not, you can think of it and let me know next class. How do you remove this last comma? Okay. So the other thing I mentioned is that, well, so this for each doesn't require you to know the stopping condition. Okay, so the question then becomes, how does .NET know when to stop? So when to stop this loop? When we set up the for loops, we needed to provide a stopping condition. So can somebody tell me how is the compiler knowing when to stop? Okay, actually, Logan says it's the list item. Okay, so I guess Logan has it as a list instead of comma. So what he has done is he said he didn't use commas, he used the list. item to display it, so, which will probably put it on separate lines. So, Logan did this. So let's see what happens if you put it within the list item tag. Okay, so it goes down like this, which prevents that extra comma from showing up. The only issue is it obviously goes over multiple lines, but at least it doesn't put that extra comma, indicating as though there might be some number after that. So as a user, you don't want to be misled into thinking that there are potentially missing numbers. Okay. The other question I had was, which is a more fundamental conceptual question, how does the for each loop understand or recognize when to stop? Because there is no stopping condition specified, how do you think it knows when to stop? Obviously, that's the issue we were having with the for loop, because we needed to know this input term. The for each loop now doesn't seem to need this input term. Anyone? This clearly makes this one of the advantages of using the for each, since we don't need to know a stopping condition or specify a stopping condition. Again, the question is, how do you figure it out? How does the system know when to stop? Keep in mind that we are saying, well, look inside this list of items. Okay, so when .NET, so we are saying retrieve one item at a time from this list, and so the compiler itself is aware that it has to stop when it reaches the end of this list. So if this list had 6 items, it will pull out those 6 items, so send it into this variable, and then we can display it 6 times. If it had 8, it will go through it 8, and so on. So we don't have to specify it. The .NET compiler figures it out by going through the list one at a time, and it knows when it's reached the end. In contrast, the for loop obviously doesn't know when to stop unless you specify when it has to stop. And for us to be able to specify that, we need to know the input term. Now, one of the things I said is, instead of just saying the Fibonacci number is, we probably also should say for the nth Fibonacci term, and n being whatever the term the user wanted, we need, instead of just providing this Fibonacci number is, it doesn't quite say, well, which term in the sequence is it, and how many terms are in the sequence. So how do we get that term? This was one of the other things that I'd asked you to work on. How do we get that? And then just pause a few seconds to see if you figured out a way to get whatever the term was that, remember this term that we are mentioning here is the term that the user entered when we prompted them. So how do we get that value to display here? Anyone? How do we get that value to display the particular term number? And if you were using just the for loop, you would need that term number. No one? Did anyone attempt it? Logan, did you get this what we had discussed to display for the, so instead of, obviously if the user entered the 6th term, you would be saying 6. If it was the 8th term, you would be saying 8th, and so on. So Logan, did you figure that out? You could not figure out that part? Okay. So if we go back to this, in the controller, you have the input term provided by the user in this variable. Okay. Now, this input term was sent from another view, which is line Fibonacci. You're taking this input term, sending it to the controller, and from the controller over here, we want to send it to Fibonacci result. Okay, so we want to display it at this point. Now we said the way that you move data or send data from the controller to the view is one of the ways, the simplest way is using a view bag. So the simplest thing we could do is to set up a view bag variable. I'll call it input term. That's going to hold the input term that the user provided. Okay. And once we have this, it becomes relatively simple to retrieve it by going in here and saying at viewBag dot input term. Okay. So now if I do this, and I refresh this, okay, for the it has not picked out, because let me go back to this and do it again. For the, okay, let's see, it's not picking up the value. Let's see, why would it not be picking up the value? Input term, I'm assigning the value that the user provided to the view bag, and then the view bag in turn sends it over to the result view, and I want to display it here. So let me just run this again. Because the change occurred in the controller rather than just the view, that might be the reason it was not sent. It didn't just refresh. So if I send this in 6, okay, so I have the 6th Fibonacci term. The number is 5, and the sequence is this. Okay, so the reason that I just could not refresh it was the change was not just happening in the view. I changed some code in the controller as well. So if I make changes in the controller, this piece of code is in the controller. I needed to rerun it. I couldn't just refresh the page, the web page. We're just going to see how many minutes we have. It's now 9:30. Okay. So now if I go back here, if I now have this input term, then I can go ahead and set up the sequence using the for loop. And I will leave it to you to do this when you come to the next class. So what would you have to do for setting it up? So now you know where you get the input term from. It's available in the view bag. So obviously you can use that here. And then what would you have to do? So inside the loop, what do you have to do if you use a regular for loop instead of the for each loop? Okay. And again, even there it will show you the advantage of using the for each. So going forward, we are going to, whenever there is a loop, where you think it's a for, I want you to start thinking of implementing it using a for each, and you want to move beyond the for, because there are some cases where you might still stick with the older for loop version, but in most cases this is going to be much superior and more efficient to work with. Okay, I'll ask you at this point, are there any questions regarding what we discussed? So this was the sort of the end point. There, I did mention I'll show you how you can make a change to this, the application name, Motiverse in the footer. But before I move to that point, any questions? Which means that you're pretty much having this. How many of you are having this result now? Logan obviously has it. Anyone else? Okay, so does that mean nobody other than Logan has it working? The page is displaying, but my numbers aren't showing up. That doesn't make sense. If you have gone through this process, you obviously have to pass the value from, so when you're troubleshooting, what you need to say is, okay, are the numbers, the first step is you have to figure out, are the numbers being retrieved from, so is the calculator class doing its work to get the number back. And so you might want to, for example, put a breakpoint here to see if the Fibonacci number actually came in, or something here. So that tells you the calculator class that's doing its work. The second thing is, well, we are retrieving the values into the view bag, so is the view bag holding it or not? So you can actually put breakpoints and see what's happening inside of the view bag, the variables. The third step is Well, we want to return the Fibonacci result view. So the view, you're going to check, you have to check, have you given it the correct name? So return view Fibonacci result, and that has to correspond to the result web page, which is what we've been discussing here. So you have to check those 3 steps to see the 3 pieces, whether they are all addressed correctly, so 1 step at a time. And if all 3 are there, then it should be giving you this result. Okay. Okay. So that's what you'll have to go through, and the test actually said her test is failing. There's nothing we have done. The test should, we have not touched the test, we have not touched the model class. So essentially the tests should all be working fine. Whatever we do at this is on the controller and the view. So essentially it's the UI that we are addressing. The logic behind the scenes continues to be the same. So the test should not, there shouldn't be any effect on the test whatsoever. The last piece I said I'll show you is how do you make a change to whatever shows up as the application name and the footer. Okay, so I'll just show that to you. So go into under views, you have a shared folder, go to layout, open up the layout, and in the layout it tells you view bag dot title is my ASP net dot application, and then so you have that my ASP net dot application, and as far as the application name itself, you'll see that there is what's called an action link. So if you want to call this instead of application name, well, let's see, just instead of the generic, if you want to call it last name, whatever your last name is, Fibonacci app. So this should show up as the title. The rest of it you can leave as this. So if I just save this, this is going to be inside of layout dot CSHTML under the shared folder. And then if I save that, this is the action link. So you come back here and refresh it. This should change the name to whatever your name is, Fibonacci app. And finally, there should be some place down here for the footer. So again, if you want to change it to from this last name application, and this gives you the current year. This is the copyright here. So if you refresh it, okay. So this takes care of the first MVC application and the testing. So for next class, what I want to do is something we had said we will discuss regarding the college basketball application. We are going to work on creating a class diagram, a simple class diagram, and off of it, so we'll go through it in small iterations. So what I would like for you to do before you come to class, for each of you to, well, one of the things I obviously I'll come around to make sure that you are having this running. That's, I want to make sure your tests are running, want to make sure you're able to run it and display the results like what we just discussed. And then after you do that, I want you to, well, have your user stories set up. And Liv had suggested buying tickets as one of them, and we will sort of go a little deeper into the user stories part, and then discuss how do you create a class diagram. And with user stories, we're also going to get into using Visual Studio Team Services. This is for the group project, so you need to have that. So we are, so again on Tuesday, I'm going to meet with each of the groups and make sure that all of you are having team services set up. So we will focus on this, user stories, starting a class diagram, and then user stories for your project, how you can start setting it up with Visual Studio Team Services. Okay, so we'll start now, and we'll get back next class, but when you come to next class, please make sure that your entire application is working. Okay, so that's about it. I'll see you next Tuesday.